Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Alabama Department of Archives and History. Welcome to all of you here in our Farley Auditorium and those who are joining us online for today's Food for Thought. Before we begin, I have a few quick announcements. First, I want to make sure you're all aware of the fact that our new temporary exhibition, History Lives On, Preserving Alabama's Rosenwald Schools, is open on the second floor. It'll be open through May 2024, so please take time to go and check it out. And if you're not here with us in person today, I hope you can come to the archives and see it. It is an amazing exhibit done in partnership with Auburn Architecture School. I'd also like to invite you to join us on Monday, November 6th for our next research rundown, as reference archivist Kayla Scott Gerner will discuss researching your World War I ancestor. Now, this is going to be a virtual-only series available on our Facebook and YouTube channel. You can watch it live and ask questions, or you can go back and watch it later if you don't have time to come live. That's going to be at noon on November 6th. And lastly, I'd like to invite you to join us on Thursday, November 16th for our next installment of Food for Thought as Christopher Rain presents Mobilizing the South, the 31st Infantry Division, Race, and World War II. And that's going to be noon on Thursday, November 16th here in the Farley and online. I'd like to take a moment to thank the Alabama Humanities Alliance for funding 2024 Food for Thought, and for the Friends of the Alabama Archives for sponsoring all of our events. Now on to today's speaker. Sophia Bracey Harris has given more than 40 years of distinguished service to the fight to improve the accessibility of childcare for children of color, and further leadership and economic development in marginalized communities. As co-founder and executive director of the Federation of Child Care Centers of Alabama from 1972 to 2015, Harris's passion for equipping others to transform their lives was recognized with numerous prestigious awards, including the Rockefeller Public Service Award and the John D. and Catherine T. MacArthur Foundation's Genius Award. Today, she will discuss her recent memoir, Finding My Own Way, A Journey to Wholeness Against the Odds. Please join me in welcoming Sophia Bracey Harris.
Thank you, Alex. Good morning.
Good morning.
It's wonderful to be here. It's wonderful to see you and see friends that I haven't seen for a while and few that I've seen recently. And as I said, it's also nice that I've got two of my doctors in the house. So given my past year, I think that's not a bad idea. But it's absolutely a treat being here, and I'm so happy to have been invited to share with you this very, very special undertaking that I have, finally concluded. But before I get into that, I would like to acknowledge two people in the audience, and that is Mona Davis and Cynthia Brown. These two women have been my eyes and ears and support system to allow and help me to do the self-publishing of my memoir. We had some major publishing companies that wanted to do it, but they wanted to do a bit of rewrite. And so that was not in the plan for us. And so I'm thankful for that, and just also for the support, that I've been able to receive. And I also want to acknowledge too, that this place, the archives, was not quite a place that I felt, warmth in terms of it There was a few times I was here and it was fairly sterile, but I want to give a shout out to Dr. Bridges, Ed Bridges, for at the time that I was doing the research and trying to help be sure that my memory was capturing facts as they were, made it very welcoming to pursue and look through the archives, and just so grateful for the Southern Courier's articles, Viola Bradford and Jim Pepler's photos, all of those things. Really, you'll see some of those showing up on this on the slide here, but help to really give some life and also credibility to what I shared in my memoir, Finding My Own Way. Let me just start by saying that why I wrote this book. And please forgive me, I'm thankful for these papers. I'm not making excuses, but aside from my, grateful 74 years, I've had a few memory issues here in the last year that, so I didn't want to come up here and do like one of our national congressmen, look at you in a blank stare and wonder, what am I planning to say next? So I really did help myself by putting some notes down. One of the primary reasons for this memoir is that I wanted young people. I wanted students like myself in 1965. I wanted them to have an understanding of what life was like and what their history, what is the history that they have come from. And it was important for me to really capture this period that was so impactful for the person, the individual that I became. I also wanted to share the experiences of some untold heroes, sheroes. And those were the women who were caregivers, who had the determination that their children, they wanted their children to be taught by individuals who appreciated those children as children and not lesser beings than that. I wanted to share their story of how that determination turned into something that really, I think, has impacted the state in a powerful way in terms of the many hundreds and thousands of children that have come through those community-based child care programs that in 1971, with the Child Care Act of 1971, was basically said you could not do this unless you were licensed by the state of Alabama. And in their attempting to be licensed, basically were sent through all kinds of hurdles to prevent them from getting a license. The third reason that I wrote this book is to capture and finally overcome something that had followed me since age 16, and that was the shaming experience that I encountered on my very first day at Wetumpka High with my English teacher, who had given the class the task of writing a composition on utopia. And at the time, I had never heard the word utopia and did not realize that she was saying composition. And at my previous school, teachers had called that a theme paper. And I was ridiculed when she asked the question, and the class became absolutely still and quiet, why I was not doing the assignment. And I said, I don't understand. And she said, what don't you understand? Do you know what a composition is? And at that point, I thought it probably was theme paper, but I just didn't want to guess. And I said, no. Do you know what the definition of utopia is? And I said, no. And she said, and you think you are fit to be in our school? And I absolutely wanted to die. I was so ashamed that I had let down my teachers. I had let down my parents. I had let down the people in my community who had, were celebrating me. I had let down my race. And that was one of the things that followed me throughout my life. Even in my professional world, people would say to me, Sophia, you are a good writer. And I would not accept that, because in my head, I carried the shame and the memory of having let down and disappointed people who knew me and who were championing me, that somehow I let them down. And so the writing of this memoir and finishing of it in June of 2021 was a major, major, major celebration for me, that finally I had overcome something that had followed me. And I think in a way, that shaming experience probably describes much of the stories and the struggle that is captured in my journey to wholeness, finding my own way, a journey to wholeness against the odds. And the odds being poverty. Growing up in Elmore County in the community of Redland and a family of 10, we were poor. As they would say, so poor, they probably couldn't put two of the O's in the poor, spelling of poor. That's how poor we were. It also, it reflects in my mind, again, the feelings of being a burden to my family, because I was a sickly child. I had rheumatic fever, had scarlet fever, had asthma, bronchitis, sickly. And so much so that I missed a whole year. I missed a year out of school at age 10 because I just was not able to walk, to catch the bus, which was nearly a mile from the house. Mom and Dad had no transportation. The mule and wagon was our form of transportation. And she would beg neighbors and my aunt and uncle, or whoever she could, to take me into town to get my weekly penicillin. And again, the encounter on this day of going into the town of Wetumpka, catching the bus. Thankfully, the bus driver would allow her to let me ride the bus and get off at the doctor's office there. And then I would stay all day and then catch the bus when it came back in the afternoon around 3 after school. And on this particular day, as it was getting close to 2 o'clock, I knew the bus would be coming in about an hour. And I asked the colored nurse, we had the 2 waiting rooms, white and colored. I asked her why had I not been seen by the doctor. And she said she would check. And she went and asked the doctor, says, this girl was wanting to know why she hasn't been seen. And he said, who is she? And she said, it's Sophia Bracy. And he said, loud enough to be heard in both waiting rooms, tell her until her mammy pays me some money, I am not touching her. And oh my God, I felt at that age of 10 that I was the blame for this doctor shaming my mother and her reputation that she was a deadbeat and didn't pay her bill. But I knew I had to tell my mother when I got home why it was that I couldn't go back to the doctor. And oh my God, all day, I just asked, please help me, God, to know what to say to my mom. And at the same time, I blamed myself. Because of my illness, I had put my mom in a situation where her reputation was being disparaged. That was another experience that God itself embedded long before 65, when I was 16 and had this statement by the teacher. It was in 2012 that it was finally determined that I had an autoimmune disease that had caused me to have inflammation of the giant cells of the head. All of those years of doctors and hospitalizations and various things, it had not been known why I was a sickly child. And of course, that disease kind of went into remission with some powerful steroids and other things. And it resurfaced again in July of this year. So I've had the experience of really being grateful that which I didn't know at the time, but later learned that my mother was told that they did not expect me to reach adulthood as a child, although they didn't know exactly what the reasons were. It was just that I was sickly. So I have been face to face here in this past 6 months of, again, something that, followed me throughout my childhood. But oh my goodness, there has been some growth. And part of that growth came in finishing this memoir and coming to the realization that whatever my fate is, it is mine to decide that I am going to work through, I'm going to fight for, and I'm going to hang in there. And I am not going to join with others in beating up on Sophia, that somehow or another, she is just not quite good enough. She is just not whole enough. And so as I grew and left Wetumpka High, there were some things that I really, really took with me. And part of those were a love for the underdog. Really, really knowing what it felt to be an underdog. And for me, that was children, young people. And because I was the sickly one and all of mom had about, 4 or 5 under my age, I also was the caregiver for those as they worked in the fields and so forth. And I was a protector, and not in my wildest imagination did I have any clue that 43 years of my life I would be working with an organization that was trying to protect children through the Federation of Child Care Centers of Alabama. Part of what I think this memoir was about, in addition to the things that I've mentioned, is what happened to my family when my sister, who decided to hit back to a white student who had hit her with a slingshot rock and was expelled from school and expelled again and expelled. And when I say expel, I meant expelled from Wetumpka High, but then as soon as Tuskegee Institute High School, Tuskegee High School, she was expelled from there, from the Tuscaloosa and Druid in Tuscaloosa. She was taken away from there after a couple of weeks and finding out that she had been expelled from Wetumpka High, and spending from October throughout the next couple of months, feeling betrayed, feeling shamed, feeling that she was being sacrificed in not being able to get an education. And finally, when the NAACP Legal Defense Fund and the American Friends Service Committee managed to get her back in school, and she was to return to school the Monday of January following the 1st at 1 a.m. in the morning, with 10 of us asleep in the home. 2 Molotov cocktails penetrated the walls of our cinder block house with an explosion of fire. A third fell in my dad's pickup truck that was near the window. And our home burned to the ground. The archives records here bore witness to the fact that my father gave one of those, the one that had not exploded, to the deputy sheriff. And those papers still accounted that there was no signs of foul play in the burning of the Bracey family home at 1 a.m. in the morning. We spent the next 15 months in a 2-room hay shack without windows. And that experience, again, was one that built in some determination, because on that Monday following the firebombing at 1 a.m. on Sunday, we were back on the bus going to Wetumpka High. And we didn't stop. And that was in part because of the goodwill of some individuals who were willing to defy the customs of our time and put their lives on the line and get in their little Volkswagen from Atlanta and drive over to Elmore County to ensure that the Braceys had some food and that we were able to be in the school that we had chosen. It was that, watching those 3 women, 2 white and 1 black, My mother was scared to death, praying that they would not be harmed, praying that they would get back safely. It was that experience that became etched in my memory, is that all white people were not evil, that all white people were not mean and ugly in the way that we were treated on the bus, in the way that we were treated in the classrooms, in the way that the teachers allowed the students to threaten our lives. Do you want to go nigger hunting tonight? Yeah, we're going to go coon hunting. My cousins and my uncles are going to go coon hunting tonight. Well, you're going to get us some coon niggers tonight. And the teacher would laugh with them. An excerpt in my page 77 reads, the title of that chapter was Guardian Angels. Many white people knew in their hearts that the whole structure of white supremacy was unjust. But they also knew working openly for racial justice would cost them dearly, and they simply weren't willing to pay the high price. That was an excerpt. I want to just say again that one of the reasons that I also found writing this memoir important for me, I felt it was also important to help share with others, and particularly our young people, to share with others that even in the climate of divisiveness and suspicion, it's the recognition that we are all a part of the human family. Our differences can become our strengths. Small acts of kindness, open to learning about our differences, and a willingness to walk in another person's shoes will go a long way in helping us to achieve a peaceful world. I wanted the message of love. I wanted to share that the bus driver who on the day of the killing of Martin Luther King, as the boys celebrated, the football types celebrated, and oh, I tell you, oh my God, I'm so sorry, I'm so sorry. Oh my God, why are you sorry, Bobby? I'm sorry, somebody beat me to killing Martin Luther King. And to see, because I sat right behind him, we were to sit up front for our safety, as he looked to the side and could see the tears beginning to welled up in my eyes, to say, don't let them see they're getting next to you. That same bus driver, on the day that my sister had been arrested and was not on the bus, and I said to him, Mr. Greer, my sister is not on the bus, as he was revving up to pull away from the school grounds. He says, where is she? I said, I don't know. She's not on the bus. He pulled up to the principal, who was out with another teacher monitoring the bus, school buses. And he said, this girl said her sister is not on the bus. Who is her sister? Deborah Bracy. The nigger gal is in jail where she ought to be for hitting a white boy. And I just went to mush, because I realized that that could mean that we may never see her again, that she could already be dead. I asked him to please let me off, because our pastor was a co-owner of a funeral home over in the city of Wetumpka. And I asked him to please let me off because we didn't have phones at our house. I knew it was going to be close to being dark. It was getting October and it was getting dark early. And by the time we took that bus ride home, it would be getting dark. And he says, no, I can't do that. It's not allowed. And as we began to get closer across the bridge and coming around the town, in the town where the funeral home was, in the cotton gin that Dad brought his cotton to gin, he sped up and then threw on brakes and said, get off, get off, get off now, hurry up. I tried reaching him a couple of times to no avail after I became an adult. Finally, I reached out to him 30 years later. And during that phone call, I said to him, I just wanted you to know that that was the kindest act, letting me off that bus, anybody has ever done for me. And he wanted to know the names. He had all the names in his memory of the 8 others, Blacks that were on his bus, wanting to know how they were doing and where they were. It was during my looking up at people, searching for people as I published my book in 2021, I realized that he had died the year before, and that he was a 2-time Purple Heart recipient from World War II. And I thought about, again, the acts of kindness of his. He said to me on that call, you all weren't treated right. I just did the best that I could. He would race the bus back to the school because he knew that the guys were strong enough, the football types, to overtake the bus, and God knows what could have happened to us had they done that. There was also another mention or two. One was a professor over at what is now Faulkner. They had a Christian camp out there where we lived. And they took our family on as being one of their families, that this was prior to our integrating the school. And they would come out and we were do Santa Claus for our family. He asked me Dr. Morris asked me, what did I want for Christmas? And I said, I just want to be able to sing "O Holy Night" in the school choir. The director had asked me about it, but of course I had gotten a cold and I couldn't go and had missed rehearsals. And he said, when is the performance to happen? And I told him, on 2 occasions, Brother Morris came to the house. And when I went to school the day of the performance and said to the teacher, I think I can sing. And she said, I'm so sorry, but you missed the rehearsals and you don't know the song. I said, but I do. It became my favorite Christmas carol because I sung it that day, with the school choir. I remembered that act of kindness on the part of this person at that same school, some years later, as I graduated from Wetumpka High and went to 2-year college because it was close to my home, a professor used scripture to justify the enslavement of Black people. When I raised my hand and disagreed, he said, you are a prime example of why you people need masters, because you don't know how to conduct yourself. So as these experiences, encounters, shaped my grit, the kindnesses also shaped another part of Sophia, and that is to not allow authority, not allow those who are in charge to cause you to not hold on to your values and your faith about what is right and what is wrong, because all of us as human beings deserve to be treated as human beings. They were down and they were up sides to my experiences. Part of what I learned from the experiences, and I've shared some of them, there are a couple of others that I just think is so important for us as we figure out a world of technology with lots of distractions, whether they're phones, whether they're TikToks or whatever. When I left Wetumpka High and graduated, the summer of 1968, I spent it at, they call it the School for the Retarded. We kind of make it sound a little bit better than that these days, in Brandon, Vermont. Also, the next year, I spent it at a housing project, Columbia Point housing project. Very demoralized residents there, and a war happening between the militants and the other groups that they were warring against. The third summer was at a camp in Luna Pier, Michigan, setting up a halfway house and a health facility for migrant families whose children had no health care. They had none. Those three experiences gave me a view of the world much larger than Redland and Wetumpka and what I had experienced. It gave me an opportunity to also give of myself. The first, in 68, I remember sharing with Bruce, who was so hurt, he was moved to tears, that I said to him, I don't want to hear anything you got to say. Because Bruce's skin, red skin, reminded me of the neighbor, white neighbor, who openly bragged of having firebombed our home. And I said, your rust spots and your piercing blue eyes. And he said, Sophia, but you're doing the same thing to me that he did to you. Boy, didn't it hit me hard. In Columbia Point, Dorchester, Massachusetts, housing project, the militants and the Panthers were fighting each other. And in a community meeting when we were all asked to share our thoughts of what this community needs, one of the nuns that was working with us raised their hand. And he responded to her, Whitey, nobody asked you your opinion. That's the problem. You, Gigi, whatever, always trying to be ahead of things. I raised my hand and said, we're all here to help. We don't have to insult each other. He wanted to know who and where I was from. I told him. He said, well, let me make myself clear. If you correct me once again, you will be shipped back to Alabama in a pine box. In Luna Pier, again, it was a different experience with Hispanics, and families got to march with Cesar Chavez. What I'm saying here as I wrap up, thank you, Alex. It's so important for us to give our young people opportunities to experience life and experience the world, experience community service, to be in conversations with the others, to know each other. It's so important for us to give them. That is a responsibility we have as adults. That is the responsibility we have if we want to pass on to the next generation a world where we can appreciate and respect each of our humanity. I hope that the memoir, I didn't speak much about faith, but my faith, which my mother drilled into us, was the key for those moments, even when I took the 7 Tylenol at age 16, 2 months after the firebombing. God did not allow them to stay in my gut. And I'm here to tell you the stories that I've just shared. It is so important. It is so important that we provide experiences and exposure for our young people. It's not just enough to say, oh, these children these days, just whatever, and they gone TikTok crazy. What are we offering and giving them that helps them to have options? And in this room and outside this room, they have got to see us engaged in activities that helps to educate and inform them that we value and appreciate each other, regardless of what others might be doing, because that is the key. That is what got me through it. That is what helped me to be here. And I am grateful that God gave me the opportunity to finish the memoir. And I said, if you don't mind, God, a few more years would be good too. So anyway, thank you. You have questions? Opportunity?
Thank you so much. And we do have some time for questions. So if anyone in the audience has a question, just raise your hand. I can bring you the microphone. If you're joining us online, you can post it in the comments. It'll come to my phone. I can ask it on your behalf. So are there any questions?
I don't really have a question, but I've known Sophia for quite a while. And so pleased that she finally wrote this. I was going to say, the entire time you were talking, reminded me that difference does not mean deficient. And I thank you so much. I've read your memoir, and throughout it, it says that I was very, very different, but indeed you proved that you were not deficient.
Thank you, Georgette. Other questions?
I do not have a question, but this is my first experience at Food for Thoughts, and I can't tell you how inspiring and how nice it was to spend my lunch hour with you and get to know you. And I look forward to more opportunities in the future of experiencing people that have made Alabama great. So thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you.
Let me walk over here.
Excuse me. Sophia, one of the moments in your memoir that was striking to me was when you were starting to make your way and some of your, I guess, mentors weren't letting you in on what the real deal was. You weren't getting a voice in the tactics and all that. And it, it partly struck me in terms of how important it is to fight for that room for yourself, but also once we've gotten into the positions of bringing the younger folks on, it's hard to let them in on things. I just wondered if you'd like to elaborate any on that.
Yeah, I think that's a struggle that all of us 70 plus, 60s and 70 plus is how to make some space for new leadership. It is one, and I can recall that being pretty determined that I was not going to just be I had no problems taking mail to the mailbox, the post office. I had no problem dropping off something over at the courthouse. However, I insisted on being at the table and having being a part of the conversations. And I think, some of those experiences that were negative that I shared about my experiences at Wetumpka High and all, gave me that kind of grit, that I was not going to be pushed aside, regardless of who was doing the pushing, if it was something I believed that was important for me. And I just think it's so important for us as leaders, whatever that position of leadership we hold or where the area that we are working in, is that to include young folk, not only to include them, to listen to their thoughts and have the courage to let them try it out in some instances, because that's where the growth happens. That's where it takes place, because they basically will say after a while, well, they don't want me here, so I'm just going to go forth and do something else, So I appreciate that, Kimball, because it definitely is a struggle for many of us as leaders these days to really make the space that is needed. And that's why I continue to push, whether it's our churches, whether it's our sororities and fraternities, our social clubs, we must give young people meaningful opportunities for them to experience community service, because then when they get to 16, 17, 18, it's a bit easier for them to push back on us.
We have a question online that's kind of connected to that question. What advice would you say to parents struggling to teach diversity and acceptance in today's world?
Well, read my book for one. But when I was at Auburn University, we were taught that by the age of 5, a young child had already made a decision about whether they could trust the world or whether they needed to distrust the world around them. And I think the studies that I've recently seen is probably now more like about age 3, that children have made those decisions. And I think it's so important that we are aware as parents, as family members, as caregivers, as teachers, as neighbors, that our young people are looking at us, they are watching us, they're listening to us. And we can say words like greedy, lazy, ugly, stupid, dumb. These are messages our children internalize, and labels that can follow them for a long time. Heck, how long did this one follow me? 60 plus years. You are not fit to be here. So I would encourage all of us, whether it's our child, our grandchild, or our neighbor's child, we have a responsibility to encourage that young person being able to feel good about themselves and be all that they can be. I'm not saying that it's going to be absolutely, it's going to work, but at least we would have given it our best by how we treat. One of the books that we published at Focal that captured the tool of our internalized oppression, our internalized sense of inferiority, or the internalized sense of superiority. More is caught than taught. What we basically, it's how we act and how we behave that children pick up on and internalize much more than what we teach them with our mouths. And I just think, as for all of us, that is a responsibility that is so important for us to remember. If we want to create a world that's love, that's peaceful, and before I would definitely want to share about the experience of my writer's coach, Marty McCower. You'll see her in some of these slides here. Marty had Parkinson. I met her at one of the mentors' ranch out in Nevada, Meyer Miller's ranch. And Marty, I just lost my husband, and we would sit in the community room, and every morning there was a family of quails that walked across the lawn, and I would start to cry because Marty was a photographer, and she would grab her camera. No matter how quietly she grabbed that camera, the parents would huddle the biddies away for safety. And I would cry, and she said, "Sophia, you seem like to me you have a lot of stories inside of you." I said, "I do." She said, "Why don't you list them?" I had 27 stories that I listed. She said, "Well, whatever you write about them, I would be happy to read them." Her background, she was a legal services attorney, but she also had been, her parents were educated, and she had also taught English and whatever. And so I said, "Marty, I want you to read, but I don't want you telling me what I need to say." I said, because I'm very protective about what my words. She said, I promise you." Well, that relationship blossomed into a decade one, and I gave her the title of writer's coach. And she, at some point, kept wanting to change my words, change my phrasing of something. And I said, "That does not represent the culture that I came from." And she said, and she's Jewish, and many of her family members had escaped the Holocaust and lived there in the California area. I said, "Why don't you come to Alabama so you can see what I'm saying?" Well, bless her heart, she came to Alabama. And it was kind of a little stir with my neighbors because there was a white woman in and out of my house. And she was, whatever. And finally, her husband, who was a labor union organizer, retired, and he needed to come to Alabama to find his wife, so, and he would just watch us as we pushed and pulled and yinged and yang, and I say in my book that he would go out and come back with a bag of M&Ms, to kind of soften us up. And one Sunday afternoon, ours was so puffy, he went out and he was gone a good while. This time he came back with a 5-pound bag because we had nearly, whatever. The one thing she said to me, "Sophia, thank you for inviting me to come. I want you to know, I will tell you, there's not a time that we were out eating at a restaurant or at some place, whatever, that you were not seen as my housekeeper or my caregiver. Thank you for inviting me to come to understand." And I said, "Marty, thank you for being sensitive enough to notice, because there's still work to be done in how we view and categorize each other with our labels. And that's the work before us. The last chapter of my book is called The Power of Love. And in that, I say, in the last paragraph, the 10 years that we spent together, pushing and pulling, her family became my family became their family, that I felt the relationship that came forth was as close to my definition of utopia that I could come with. Thank you all.
Thank you again to Dr. Harris for joining us. And if you would like to buy her memoir, it is available in our Malone lobby for purchase, and she's willing to sign a copy for you. And I hope to see you all again next month on November 16th as Christopher Rain will talk about mobilizing the South. Thank y'all.